applications area of the platform. And I'm really happy to have you join me today to talk about the presentation I'm going to give to you regarding determining technical fit for ServiceNow apps. And what does this really mean? What does this title mean? The question comes up of like, what type of applications should people be building on the ServiceNow platform? And sometimes it's hard because a lot of times you'll hear that you can do anything with the platform, and people have built a pretty wide variety of different types of applications. So really what this presentation is geared towards is to try to help people understand what types of applications are a fit, lend themselves to the platform and what the platform supports, to help guide people that are thinking about building ServiceNow apps into figuring out what type of apps to be building. So why don't we go ahead and get started. And the way I like to start this conversation is to talk about common business applications. One thing that we'd like to say is that the ServiceNow platform is really well suited for business apps. So common business apps would be the term we'd use for applications that are a really good fit for ServiceNow, and the platform lends itself well to if you're going to build apps. And what do those things mean? Well, what we have here is a matrix, and we're showing in the middle we have common business apps and some characteristics about them, and also some samples. And then on the two sides we have one-offs and business to consumer. Basically, the two blue columns are applications or types of applications, requirements, examples, things that are not really a good fit. They're not really those common business apps. So what do we mean for some of the characteristics? Forms and lists by components that people will use. They're going to have workflows. A lot of times they might have a workflow to do approvals or to do some type of triggering of events or sending out notifications. You might want to have reporting so people can report, figure out lists and views and filter down records and send reports based on the data that they put in their application. Their application may need to have integration with another system. We'll go over the things that are available, the types of integrations that are available shortly. A service catalog, and really by a service catalog what we mean is a catalog type interface where people can come in and see things that are available to them and make choices to make requests. So think about like one of the traditional ones that's in ServiceNow is for me to get some sort of self-service. So if I'm inside my corporation and I want to make a request to have either a device provided for me or procured, but that user interface, that catalog, is what we mean when we say service catalog. And you can think that could be used for any type of request. That essentially means you're going to guide the consumer to making the choice of something that's available. Some examples of applications that have this type of these type of characteristics, like an employee onboarding app, or a software request app, or a marketing event management app, where you're entering details about a marketing event. You have some data, maybe a date and time. You have a name of it. You have a description. You have things that need some notifications need to come off about that marketing event. Maybe you need some approvals, and then you want to report on how multiple events did or when, or some feedback on them. Those would be some samples, of application of that type. On the other sides, in the one-offs, we have things that have like specialized libraries, or where you need to actually have some type of compliance requirement that that ServiceNow platform doesn't meet. Although this one's becoming less and less of an issue every day, and ServiceNow is very well accomplished in providing a compliant platform. And we'll touch on that in just a little bit. Some sample applications that are these one-off, like a CAD/CAM system. This thing's going to have high graphic dependencies, right? It's going to have specialized libraries just for rendering graphics. And you may actually want to tweak some of the, like the JVM that's actually running that to allow it to be more performant, or do specific hardware setups. Those would be one-offs, not a good fit for ServiceNow applications. It doesn't fall into the range of a common business app. Business to consumer, so if something has a highly custom UI, or like a social media app, or content management. And when I say content management, I mean something like WordPress, where really the whole purpose of the application is to manage that content, as opposed to having some flow or request-based component to it. What sample applications fit in there? Websites, right? We wouldn't recommend using ServiceNow just to host a static website, or to host a website that allows users to update content through a CMS as its sole purpose. Native mobile apps, right? That's not something you're going to build. But what you might build is an integration between a native mobile app and the ServiceNow app that you build to be able to grab some data or interact with that, or send that request or submit that request. So let's move into talking about these characteristics that I've sort of hinted at in that first slide. And the ServiceNow platform is enterprise grade. This is something you get by just deciding to build on the ServiceNow platform. So we are a very compliant platform. I could run down a whole long list of 3- and 4-letter acronyms of our compliance. I would encourage you just to go look at our website, and we list all of our compliance, all the compliance requirements that we meet. It's a pretty long list, and if there's something that's not out there, feel free to ping us, because we're continually trying to make sure we have every compliance that we can to make our platform available and acceptable for all uses, or I should say as many uses as possible. Real availability, the ServiceNow platform does not go down, so not go down on a weekly basis. There's no weekly maintenance schedule where you're going to say, oh, I'd love to have this app 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but guess what, every Sunday I have to go down for 2 hours for maintenance. That's not the case. We are not, we let essentially our customers decide when they're going to have changes be made to their environments. We definitely encourage them to take and stay close to the head, but we interact with them. We don't just suddenly bring down the environment for them for some type of scheduled maintenance. So it's going to be available. The app can be available, the platform can be available, and you can know as an app provider that the platform that's hosting your app will be available to that customer. And then it's secure. Right? We offer very granular levels of security. Our data centers are secure, our platform is secure, our environments are secure, and then as an app provider, you can actually add levels of security to your application. And that's what we really mean by enterprise grade. And that's something that just by deciding to build an app on the ServiceNow platform, you can be assured that you're receiving. Right? It's not something you as an app builder need to go think about or sort of plan for. So next thing I want to move into is data characteristics. So what type of data should your application have that allows it to fit into a common business app or ServiceNow type app? And for this part, the number one bullet point here, the number one point to make is structured data. Right? Think about much like records in a database. And some contrast it would be binary or media. Media that's going to be a binary blob, and it's going to be stored in the database. And really, the purpose of it is just like document management, not a common business app that should be built in on ServiceNow. Request management or tracking requests for something, or the workflow or the process of a workflow and the state of workflow, that can all be done in structured data. Structured data often has relationships between data. You can think about views that might be made in a traditional database. We can relate records in ServiceNow and then easily reference those in the views, the user interface we provide to our customers by creating those relationships and those references. We can leverage it via table extensions. So you don't need every table every time. There's a concept of creating a base table or a table that you create for your application and use some of those fields. And we're only added a couple of fields. So we can actually leverage inheritance by extending those tables and reuse instead of recreating, right? As much as possible. You can because this is structured data, we can do things like sort by order or only show me things that start with or contain the type of stuff, both in the UI and then in reporting as well. And you're going to be able to report on data you store in ServiceNow as long as it's structured data. I'll get more to that momentarily. So the user interface characteristics, an important one to think about when you're deciding what type of app to build. If it's going to fits on ServiceNow's, the primary user base should be a web interface today. What that means is we're going to access this app via a browser. This might seem self-explanatory, but it's really good to state it because sometimes you're thinking, okay, I could build any type of app. And what we'd say is that the first thing to consider is the primary way the user of your app is going to interact with it should be via the web interface. And that's the expectation you should be having and be designing for. Mobile access is okay. Right? Mobile access could leverage some of those integration points and interfaces we provide, but it won't be the primary user interface for an application that's a good fit for ServiceNow. Service catalog. So think about the service catalog type interface. That is a way to provide a semi-custom interface to your customers and display them some options they can click on. It's really easy to build that up in ServiceNow, and you get a lot of those components for free. All right, it's by creating data in ServiceNow, you can then have a service catalog that can offer that up. Primarily form and list based. So you can think about this as a sort of list view and detail view. right? When you create a record create a table or create a record in ServiceNow, you're going to automatically have two views. You're going to have a list view where you can see a configurable set of properties around that data or that record, and then you're going to have a form view. So if you click into that, it's kind of a detailed view. You dive into that. You then can click on a single record and only see a view in a form that shows you properties of that record, as well as other records in ServiceNow that it may reference, right? And that's what I mean by reference. We have a term called dot walking in ServiceNow that allows you to actually pull in multiple fields from referenced records. I won't go into that now, but I definitely encourage you to look it up if you are putting together apps in ServiceNow. It's an important thing to know. CMS. So CMS, so that you can build some level of customized interface for nation, but I do want to stress limited. So we offer CMS, but have a highly custom UI. Should ServiceNow be lend itself to the platform, with the platform out of the box. So then we go to a characteristics. So task-based model. Think of a request being made or a problem being entered and submitted. Really, then now we can track that data. We can do state. You can leverage workflows to those state changes, and then easily visualize those in ServiceNow. If your application is going to have a workflow, if it's going to wants to have notifications, which is often a requirement, people want to be notified when things change. Notifications that are driven off changes to fields, driven off changes to records, off events that you may create in ServiceNow, and have those result in an email that goes out or an SMS. And in the future forthcoming, we'll be offering push notification support as well for those notifications. And there's also data validation. So oftentimes a big logic point of a form or application, you want the data that comes in to be valid. You don't want garbage data coming in. We offer multiple ways to do data validation, both at the client side and at the server side, and also via code and also just via configuration. So it's really easy to set up some rules to make sure that your application actually validates data coming in and make sure that you don't end up having garbage data in your application. Security. What type of security characteristics? So we provide security control configuration via ACLs. And so in ServiceNow, you can define roles, and then you can say what role is required to do any type of operation on records or to access that even actions that can be taken in records. You can get very granular in specifying what type of role is needed, and then you would allocate those roles to a set of users or individual user. And so you can be very specific in the type of security you want to provide regarding the data in your application and the actions that your application provides users. In addition, IP address access controls can be configured. So you could configure a ServiceNow instance to only allow access to a specific subset. Oftentimes we call it a waitlist of IP addresses. So you can really restrict who's going to have application access in any way, shape, or form. Actually, I really should say instance access to any applications running on that instance of ServiceNow. And then one more thing is application scoping. This typically isn't defined as security. It's more of application fencing. Via scoping in ServiceNow, these applications can restrict access to their data and also to their logic to a scope, either their application scope or via writing it into an interface to only allow a subset of application scope to be accessed from other places in the system or other applications running in ServiceNow. Characteristics of a workflow. This is a kind of a hard one to find, but I really like to say that the applications that fit well on ServiceNow have a predictable and regular workload. Sometimes this is easier to describe as a contrast, and the contrast would be something like Game of Thrones releases, and suddenly it's streaming on HBO Go. And so for the first 2 days that's out, I'm sure HBO Go is getting hit, with a tremendous amount of workload, and then it tapers off after the season's over. Everybody's already binge watched all the episodes. Netflix would be another type of example. And the workload I'd like to describe ServiceNow really lending itself to is the Amazon storefront, right, type of workload, where you have users that are coming in and their common tasks involve viewing data about records, viewing data for something like a request they made, or in the Amazon case about something they want to buy, and then possibly ordering or clicking through to make requests or view more data, check on the state of something, or update some data about a record. That workflow or that workload is something that ServiceNow lends itself to, and we can scale really well to handle via load balancing and additional nodes, and their platform is set up to do that really well. Integration. So we offer a lot of ways to integrate into so your application that you're building can take advantage of this. We also have people that build applications that are really, their primary role or purpose is to provide an integration between ServiceNow and another system. And when we walk through some of the characteristics of this, those integrations could do things like bulk data import from other applications or legacy systems. We can reach out via JDBC. We can reach out via files being loaded into ServiceNow, FTP, SFTP. Those type of ways to load data into the system are available. We also allow you to export data for audit and also advanced reporting. So you can have send data about your application or the records in your application out to other people via email. And we're really excited because in a forthcoming release, we're going to add some support for scheduled export of data directly to flat files on ServiceNow mid server as well. So we're going to give you more ways to export data. Web services. By default, every table in ServiceNow actually is going to have web services. Both a SOAP and a REST API are provided. So when you're thinking about creating an app, and one of the requirements comes up is, hey, my app has to have an API, which is a really common requirement today. You can know that just building an app in ServiceNow, just creating those tables with that data is part of your app, they're going to have an API. Then if you want to get more specific, say your app needs to have a very custom API, you can take it to a level further and create a custom interface so that you really control the interface for your application in ServiceNow via SOAP or REST API. Authentication characteristics. So a lot of times you'll have requirements that people don't want to have a new username and password. Want to leverage something that already exists. And the way that can be done with ServiceNow is through things like LDAP, where you're importing users from an existing LDAP. A lot of enterprises will use LDAP for user management. We offer LDAP import, LDAP auth, which is where when somebody tries to authenticate to ServiceNow, we can call out to, of course, with the right network configuration, but call out to their LDAP and get authentication. Single sign-on is also supported via various means. One of the most common ones being SAML. And then another integration would be orchestration. So ServiceNow offers some orchestration capabilities via activity packs that are pre-built that allow you to UI applications directly to things like VMware or Amazon Web Services. And those are activity packs that you can find under orchestration. So maybe your application is going to leverage some of those or put a nice interface on top of that and provide that to customers would be a sample. Outbound messaging also supported, and a pretty common request if your application needs to talk to other systems. So say your application is running on ServiceNow and it wants to send messages or send information about records in your application, say like a problem or request, to another system. Oftentimes we think about this as a HTTP request. We can do those via SOAP or REST. Those are helper libraries that allow you to really easily create one of those messages up, set the content, and send it out to other systems based on triggers or to happen, updates to records in ServiceNow per se. Reporting application characteristics. So the simplest one to think of here is list. And just by having a table in ServiceNow, you're going to always have a list view. But then once you go over to the reporting, you can get a list view that offers some additional configuration, but is only going to provide read-only access. Right? That can be powerful when you want to give users access to see and view a lot of data via report and be able to configure it themselves so they can sort, filter, set criteria. And then that reporting of any one of these types can be delivered via email, right? So you can have it delivered to them in email, either as CSV or PDFs as attachments, so they can see that data in the system and run reports themselves, and they can also see the data being delivered to them. And to go over a couple of the types of reports, charts and graphs, you have for line, column, donut, histogram, and this is just to name a few. Make sure to check out the certain product documentation, and they run through all the types of reports that are available in ServiceNow. I already went over the delivery formats, and then there's also some performance analytics. So if you really want to have a really nice way to have gauges and also time series data, performance analytics is a ServiceNow product that adds on here and can offer some additional reporting. So we've gone through characteristics, and now I think it's often helpful to list some sample applications or walk through sample hypothetical applications that would really fit these characteristics in what we call a common business application that ServiceNow lends itself to. Let me just take a quick drink of water here. I'll be right back. Cool. Okay, so sample applications. First one would be, this is hypothetical. It could be a rental car fleet management system. We can imagine some of the features would be the ability, features and requirements would be the ability to track vehicle status and properties. So we think you have a car is in good shape for rent. It does not need maintenance, but you can imagine another state being needs maintenance or rented or unavailable. We want to be able to track some properties about it, make, model, year, color, so on and so forth. Reservation entry and lookup is an ability we want to have, so people can actually enter a reservation, and they can also look up existing reservations. You can imagine that you have customers that want to be able to do this, but this is probably expecting the users would be the actual the employees of the rental car company, right? So they want to be able to check and see if a car is reserved, check and see if a customer has a reservation, look up some details about that. Also, they want to be able to do customer reservation tracking. So do reporting on that, so you'll see the reservation tracking, you'll see details about customers, offer them incentives, offer them bonuses, various things, that data that they want to be able to pull up about customers and see in the system. Imagine that one of the features requests is integration with a mobile attendant device. So you imagine the last time you rented a car and you walked up, instead of having to go to the desk, somebody's standing there, they can scan the VIN number on the car and then have that update their system. Well, you could have, with that mobile device, can scan the VIN number, and then there's an application that you may have written completely out of ServiceNow, outside of ServiceNow again, because this is a mobile device, native likely. But then the integration point is that it makes calls to the app you've created in ServiceNow via the web services or APIs, and can update those records. So you can imagine a car could be returned and become available for rent again without somebody ever having to go to a desk or actually access ServiceNow via the web. They can just have done that through that integration with that mobile device. Customer notifications, so people want to receive emails that their car is ready for pickup or it's been returned. And also employees may want to see emails or SMSs that something becomes available, a car that they know customers are waiting for comes available. The technician wants to know that a car has been returned so it can be worked on. Again, these are sort of hypothetical, it's a hypothetical app, but I think all these requirements should be common to a rental car fleet management system. So let me just move on here and let's talk about how this lays out, given the characteristics we talked about before. So we've talked about the data. This all sounds like it could be captured as structured data, right? We've got tables, we have relationships between data, we can relate a customer to a vehicle, we can relate a vehicle to a location, right? Imagine we have multiple locations, we can make a relationship between those, we can display that and report on that. And then our user interface, it's primarily a web user interface, but then we would have an integration. We see that over in the top right-hand corner here, integration that could allow it to exchange data with a mobile application. Back over to the UI, it's a form and list-based representation of these records, so we can see a list of cars, we can sort them, we can see the states, we can filter by states, we can delve into them for more detail, so we can click in, imagine, and see more information about the car, even having some picture of the car in that record, so I can tell, not only does it say it's blue, but I can actually see what state it's in, if there's a big dent in front, per se. I mentioned service catalog here for capturing requests, so maybe we want to have a really easy interface that only allows our employees to do some specific actions. So instead of having to go to that car record and change the state to needs maintenance, they can just go to a service catalog and see a large button that says set car for needing maintenance, something like that. A little more catchy phrase than I came up with here. But they could click that and then it just asks them to enter the VIN number and then click submit. Now we've just given them a service catalog type interface. It has less options. They don't have to see all the details about that record, and they can just take the action they want. Workload and predictable, it sounds like a web application, right? Even if it's Thanksgiving and a bunch of people are traveling and renting cars, it's still that type of predictable workload in the application. People are clicking, people are requesting, getting responses, viewing data, reporting on data. That's the type of workload we're seeing in this application. And logic is workflows and approvals, right? And with notifications. So we have these assets, which are cars that are moving through different states. The workflow can track and model that. And as it goes to different states, we can fire off approvals. We can trigger events in the system. That could be things like notifications or even outbound messages to other systems. in like a invoice system. We have reporting, so list-based. We can see all the states of our cars. We could have a report sent out to all the managers every week saying, what's the total number of cars that are rented this week. We can also see that in some bar and pie charts, right? I think this should be a pretty common desire for this application. So this application would be an example of something that really is a good fit, I would say, for ServiceNow. The things that I've laid out in terms of requirements and then these characteristics all lend themselves to what ServiceNow can provide. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next example. So this is a less hypothetical example. So this is something I actually have worked on in the past in a former job that I had. I was building applications with ServiceNow and a custom application to do telecom equipment expense management. So in this case, we need to track telecom equipment. So this could be, that provide interaction between companies, which really works, but some of them can be of different types, not less common because we're dealing with lease lines. Various companies providing market data for exchanges. And we need to track, who's on which end, where these lease lines connected to, who is the customer, what is the that's equated to that equipment, and what is the term of the contract, where are the two ends at, what are the locations, what are the buildings that the actual lease lines terminate at. That's an important piece of data to capture here. We need to be able to understand the speed of that, the agreed upon speed that the contract is for, to know what type of is necessary, and also what type of charge pricing is going to be in play there. Then the other requirement was to generate invoices. So people would like to be able to generate invoice via PDF and see information about that was being requested. And then also have a way to have a REST API they call in and get information from, and also send data out to a third-party invoicing system. So we needed information of a set number of properties. We could automatically send out this invoicing system, generate invoices, and send them out for payment. Reporting, some need here is Excel-like, filter and sort, and then have it delivered via email. Import data from the legacy applications, multiple in this case. So we had multiple systems that were being used to track. We wanted to bring it all into one system. So we needed to import a bunch of data into ServiceNow in this case and get it into a state that we could continue tracking these historical records, and as well as start forward and entering additional new records. So we also wanted to leverage some existing domain data. In this case, it was a CMDB. And we talked about telecom equipment that wasn't being managed. There, we could just add it in CMDB. So we enhanced the record of ServiceNow as the was true for CMDB for equipment. When we go to characteristics, we've got all the things we did for last, but a lot of things are very similar in terms of data and relationships, things that lends us up to. There's no other thing but the way people using ServiceNow. So here with the
sounds like we're having a bit of a technical interruption. We've been having you on and off.
Can you still hear me?
I can. If you could also repeat this last slide, that would be great.
Sure. So last time we're going over the telecom equipment and expense, walking through the characteristics. So we started with the data, and we said, the data that we were here was about both customers and also equipment. And the customer records would be company name or the company, and then we'd also update that over the signs that they had, and the equipment that provide those types be captured in ServiceNow. Have relationships, reference records in ServiceNow. Those relationships, we can also create custom relationships to show a customer is related to this, how a customer is related to a contract. Go into the UI. The UI for this was a web interface, nothing but a web interface, which we know we can use and does lend itself to ServiceNow. Form and list-based representations of these records, of this data, a service catalog for capturing requests, so people didn't have to go into that folder that showed you all the data about a requested lease line. They could just be driven to put in the pertinent information. Workload, predictable again, very much like a web app type of load. People are making requests, people are viewing data, people are viewing report. Integrations, there wasn't integrate a vendor product so that we would actually send data out about lease lengths and contracts so that invoices could be generated. That would be done via outbound messaging. Logic, very much like task and asset type model of logic. There were workflows and approvals, and then notifications and reports were sent out via email, right, at scheduled intervals. So if something was a lease line that had been requested, something went to an approved state, we could send out, notify the technicians and as well as salespeople to know that the state changed and that it would be put into place in action. And we'd also need to start calculating billing, and then reports would be generated over time and sent out to let people manage this equipment that were in ServiceNow in this application. Reporting for this, again, was just list-based. So all of these requirements and the way that it was implemented in ServiceNow really lends itself to functionality the ServiceNow platform provides for you as an app creator. So this would be another good example of a common business app for the ServiceNow platform. Let me go ahead and change this slide. And can you guys confirm that you can still hear me okay? No more problems with the audio? Lisa, can you confirm that?
The audio is good now.
Okay, cool, thanks. So moving forward, so we've seen two examples, one hypothetical, one real, of applications that were a good fit for ServiceNow. Now we want to go into an example that's not really a good fit. And I'm from Chicago, I live in Chicago, and so I took something from my hometown. And this example would be a marketing campaign, right? We want an application that's going to provide marketing campaign, functionality for a marketing campaign for, in this case, a mayoral candidate. Features / requirements. Primary functionality is delivering streaming video via a custom web interface, which allows for embedded video, and then also a mobile application, which allows for video to be streamed out of the candidate's speaking engagements. And then also want to provide tie-ins to social media. So when we look at what it's made up of or comprised of, we think of what's the data that's here. It's really streaming video that's being stored as a blob, and then sent out. And really, that doesn't lend itself to the characteristics we talked about for ServiceNow applications, right? This isn't structured data. This is just blobs are going to be streamed out, and oftentimes the workload for this is going to be in small windows with very high peaks. So after something happens or while an engagement is happening, there's going to be demand to stream out this data. And then once that's no longer in the news or no longer relevant, requirements to go stream this. But for a short period of time, there's a burst of demand, similar to something like something we release in Netflix or HBO Go, or something everybody wants to go watch that and have it streamed out then. The UI, highly custom web UI, right? It's really and so people are going to come in, content, has some advertisements, probably some abilities to make donations, so on and so forth. And then it also needs to have a native mobile UI. That's not is going to be built on ServiceNow. It's going to require some customizations outside, someone who built it for the common mobile apps today and mobile platforms. However, the pieces that do fit would be integrations, right? It's easy to have an integration with social media. So this should be outbound messaging from ServiceNow, from the app in ServiceNow being sent to, like something like Facebook or Twitter's APIs. In addition, you could have that integration accept requests or data from the mobile app. But once again, the streaming of video would not be a good use case. So logic, asset model, tracking metadata regarding video content, you could imagine that logic is a fit because you just want to track this or doesn't fit, some meta, but without being delivered, the app really doesn't provide the requirements that are stated. And then security, fine-grained, this is fine. So for security, fine-grained access control, you want to define who can and who can't submit videos, or who can and cannot edit videos, or edit records about data about videos. That could be done with roles and ACLs really well in ServiceNow. So overall, that last example was something like an application that would not be a good fit. It's not a common business application. It doesn't lend itself to the ServiceNow platform. So now that we've gone through a couple of characteristics and also a few sample apps, a couple that do fit, one that does not fit, I think it's helpful to go into talking about asking the right questions. And what we're really talking about here is somebody's asked you to build an application on ServiceNow. And now you need to determine if the application somebody's requesting is something that you should even consider building in ServiceNow. And I think it's helpful to know how to ask those questions to the person who's requesting that app, so you can determine, hey, is it a good fit? Should I even consider going down the path of building this in ServiceNow? Is it a no-brainer? I know this is gonna work. So the first thing I want to bring up is, I always ask when people have in the past asked me, can we build it on ServiceNow? I say, what's the primary user interface going to be? Is it going to be web? Is it going to be mobile? Is it desktop? Is it hybrid? Hybrid by which hybrid I mean, you're going to use the web, but then there's also a mobile component. And I really want to get answers to that. And the answer that I'm looking for to decide if it's going to be a technical fit for ServiceNow is that the primary user interface can be the web. Right? It's going to be the user going to and making requests for a ServiceNow instance and pages on that ServiceNow instance and records. The second part, once mobile comes up, because mobile days, is making sure that people understand that the mobile application won't be built on ServiceNow. That mobile application, for it to interact with that app that's on ServiceNow, it's going to be APIs in the interface that's provided. That's doable. It should be very clear that that mobile app would not be built on ServiceNow. Once again, they're kind of like mobile here because the desktop app has to be built on whatever platform can run on desktop computers, right, or even laptop computers. They can have a component that's going to interact with ServiceNow via the APIs and integrations, but you're not going to build that app on ServiceNow. Moving along to data model, I'm trying to ask them to get characteristics, make sure it's task-based or asset-based, records with properties, structured data, things that depend on relationships, things that I would typically store not as blobs in a database. So things that would just be stored as normal records, things like ints and strings, not something that's media-based, not videos, not document management. Those would be requirements that once I hear those, I start to think, hey, this probably isn't a good fit for ServiceNow because the platform doesn't lend it to that. But there are other solutions out there that play really well with blobs, like Amazon S3. And you can imagine how an integration could be built because Amazon S3 offers up APIs. So ServiceNow could track some data, do workflows, do approval, storage of that type of data would be in another system that really lends itself to that. Nature of data, compliance and regulatory requirements, some things come up, examples like federal, medical, HIPAA per se. Once again, once I hear those requirements, I want to make sure I always ask the question, like what's the nature of the data and what's your regulatory compliance requirements? And then go check against ServiceNow. I can look for those 3 acronyms that openly I don't know a ton about. I just know if I need to find out if we support that or not, so I can answer that question and decide if the app goes on ServiceNow or could be hosted on ServiceNow. What type of access control is required? Am I just restricting who can see things? Am I restricting who can make changes to records? Can I do it in a way that provides me like using users and roles? And if I can think of a way to do that, then I can be really confident that's something that I can build on ServiceNow. Or if I need to use IP addresses to limit access, I can do that as well. Well, what is the required performance profile? So this comes back to workload, right? We're looking for things with a dependable workload, something that's like a web application, like the Amazon store per se, where you're going, you're viewing records and you're interacting with them, you're seeing data, you're seeing a list, you're searching. That's if that is the profile of the application, then I'm going to be really tempted to put it on ServiceNow and say it's a good fit. If it's going to be real-time data delivery, right, like tick data about stocks that are being traded and exchanged or equities, or if it's doing media streaming, these are things that I'm going to say, hey, if that's your need, we might need to look for a different platform that really lends itself to this real-time, like millisecond level delivery of data or streaming of media, because the ServiceNow platform doesn't lend itself to that, to those use cases. In addition, I want to say, hey, how does the application need to scale? And this goes back to users, concurrent users, increase or decrease to the expected workload. I'm looking for people to tell me about what their long-term expected use of the application is, so I can understand if ServiceNow is a fit there. Type of notifications are required, and usually people may not think about this immediately. They're thinking about their application. They're thinking about, hey, what's the user interface going to look like? What data do I need to capture? But oftentimes you want that application to be able to notify people. And the story here is if it needs to be a notification via email or SMS, push notifications, or things like integrations, we really have ServiceNow offers you a lot of options in that requirement. And so oftentimes it's pretty rare that I come up with a requirement that can't be met via the ServiceNow platform in terms of notifications. So good fit, we say and describe these as common business applications, right? And we have some characteristics about that I'm not going to read through but essentially we've gone over the characteristics of what a common business app is, and I think it's become hopefully clear through the examples and those characteristics what those look like, what they often are, and how ServiceNow lends itself as an application platform to those type of applications. Not a good fit. So I really want to draw these out. And the primary interface, not web. If you hear that, if you know that's part of the application, then you should really be a little suspect and proceed with caution about having this application be on ServiceNow. If it needs to have a highly custom UI, I've definitely seen highly custom UIs built in ServiceNow, but they definitely require more skill, knowledge, and maintenance to make them work on our platform. So I think that if that's a requirement, this might not be a good fit. Content management system. So ServiceNow is not primary use of content management as a content management system. We offer some functionality to do content management, but it's definitely not what our platform is built to do. So if that's really what the use case of the application is, I would say it's not a good fit. Streaming content delivery. I don't think I need to say too much about this, but if you're going to stream video, that's not the type of application that's going to fit well with the ServiceNow platform. Unpredictable workload spikes, hardware level fine tuning. So if I need to actually change hardware, if I think that I ever have the case where I want to call ServiceNow and say, hey, you know what? I think if you could put a different network card in and a different graphical processor, then this app would run better. That's not the type of app that we should be thinking about as a good fit for ServiceNow. Website hosting, and also real-time data delivery. I just recently went on this talk, so hopefully that's clear. And then what I usually like to draw out is if I have a requirement or a request for an application, I'm thinking about if I can put it on ServiceNow, I like to try to draw out what are the characteristics or requirements that are a good fit, and what are the ones that are not. If the ones that are not can be met through either a different application or a different delivery system that has a way that we can integrate with ServiceNow, then oftentimes there's a way to have a partial fit, right? I might be able to store the data in ServiceNow because I really want that security, compliance, and reliability, but I need to actually have a way to interact with it from some other application. And so I can leverage the APIs that are provided. So I can make best use of the things that ServiceNow affords me and overcome the things that ServiceNow is not good for as an application platform by some other provider. A good example of this would be, hey, this for my application is going to be mobile, but I don't want to have to store all this data. I really like already using ServiceNow. I already have data in ServiceNow that I want to be able to interact with. So the mobile application gets built via using Xcode or the Apple framework or XYZ other frameworks that could allow you to build a mobile application. But then ServiceNow's interfaces, the REST and SOAP APIs interact with some of that data that it needs to display. Things can benefit from tying into ServiceNow and the data that exists there. Plus, as people and users are already using ServiceNow, they get familiar with the user interface. They know and come to expect that if they see a list view, they can sort and they can do multiple edits. They can create a report easily from that list view. And so they tend to start to want that functionality. So if you can think of ways to leverage the ServiceNow platform as part of the app, and then have a tie-in with another system that lets you overcome some requirements that are not a good fit, you can come and find these partial fit type of applications that can help your customers out. And with that, I've come to the conclusion. So I really thank everybody for joining today. Hopefully informative, having this talk. And then I'll also be looking at the community discussion that goes on about this expert chat today and trying to answer questions and follow up with people. And thank you everybody for your time. I appreciate it.